budget tomorrow night. What's going to be in it? Let's start with you, Alistair. Government. Well, let's round the panel. Government accounts looking good. $1.3 billion ahead of forecast. Surplus. Is now the right time for tax cuts? Yes.
The right time now is to get health, housing and education sorted.
And
so that
surplus
surplus has been built on 40,000 people being homeless. It's been built on more children in hospital with diseases they're getting from their cold, damp
tax cuts,
homes.
yes or
so
no?
tax cuts
yes
are
or
not
no?
a priority alongside those things.
All right, one of the few Western nations in the world that has a surplus like this, you've got to be proud of it.
We've gotten there through cutting, in real terms, funding for education and health and other critical services. We haven't invested in the infrastructure we need.
So tax cuts, yes or no?
If you're campaigning on tax cuts, you're campaigning for service cuts and a less equal society.
All right. Alistair, would you support tax cuts? You're a business owner. Would you support tax cuts?
I support smaller government. I support...
tax cuts?
Yeah, well, that means tax cuts in some form. It doesn't have to be any barrier to... It's got to be targeted to families is my preference.
What about you, David? You support tax cuts, of course.
Well, I support starting with the facts, and the facts are that the government has $20 billion of surpluses coming down the line in the next 4 years, even after you allow for all the things they talked about, health and education and so on, to increase by $14 billion over those 4 years. And the ACT Party calculations show how you could have a top tax rate of 25 cents without cutting any other services, in fact, allowing them to increase.
So who would there you go, a bit of support there. Is it true that under Act, no one will pay a higher than 25% tax?
No one will pay more than 25% income tax. That would be our top rate. Of course, there are other taxes. There's GST, there's tax on your fags, there's tax on your booze, there's tax on your petrol.
Okay, 25%
you try to walk,
income.
they tax your feet. You try to sit, they tax the seat. But nevertheless, you wouldn't pay more than 25% income tax.
Think of the small business owner sitting here tonight, listening to this on backbenders, going, "That sounds great to me."
Yeah, look, and in an ideal world, that sounds absolutely
No,
terrific.
why does it have
But
to
the question for David is, what services are you going to cut?
Absolutely
what services get cut
that
for
is
you
with,
to do
that is with
25 cents
baseline
in the
spending
dollar?
this year and $14 billion extra
not.
spending by
That is completely
2020.
wrong. There is no way that adds up. It
people
doesn't
can
add
go
up.
on the ACT Party website, act.org.nz/tax.
I'll come back to you.
These guys want tax. These guys want tax rates up.
The facts matter, and Grant Robertson is wrong about the
That's
facts.
enough. That's enough. No, we're going to go to the audience, a guest rather.
Well, actually, I've got Terry Boucher. He's the author of a book called Tax and Fairness. Terry, I feel like this tax system hasn't changed in about 30 years. Is it still current? Does it need to change?
There is stuff that needs work needs doing around the fringes, or particularly in a key area around the taxation of savings, because we concluded that our savings are way overtaxed, and property is an area which is being taxed very lightly relative to other asset classes. So 2.5 million Kiwi savers are right now being overtaxed.
So you're saying more tax on property?
Yes, readjusting the tax burden would be the way I'd put it, to be diplomatic about it. But yes, we don't have a capital gains tax. And savers in the Kiwi saver funds are paying way too much. The biggest single taxpayer in the country in 3 out of the last 4 years was the New Zealand Super Fund, which is supposed to be saving for our retirement.
Interesting. What do the MPs think?
What do you think, Julianne, about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We need a capital gains tax. We need a fairer tax system. And these guys will make it sound like everybody is going to be paying more tax, but really, it's the wealthiest people who can afford to contribute more, and everybody is going to benefit from better investment in infrastructure and critical government services that make our society richer in the long term.
Okay. Alistair, do you go along with that?
Well, the super fund is not the silver bullet. It's only a very small part of the superannuation
But property
message.
tax?
No, you tax properties and you'll get your rents. Next thing you'll know, you'll tax properties and your rents will go up because it's an increase in costs to the landlords.
Excuse me, Andrew.
Let him answer first.
You put more costs on the landlord, he or she will pass that on to the tenants. Rents will go up.
Okay, all right. I'm going to check back with the tax expert. Is that right, Terry?
We don't know. If the landlords are being propped up to the moment with negative gearing, we don't know what's going to happen if that's removed. The housing market at the moment, property only contributes $177 million in 2015. Put it in context, Kiwi saver funds and superannuation schemes paid 338 million. The New Zealand Super Fund paid 123 million. And savers on the resident withholding tax on interest accounts was 1.67 billion. Now, all of those as a percentage of assets dwarf what is being paid by property, which by that calculation would be about 0.025%.
All right, thank you. Terry, a round of applause, Terry Boucher. Very, very cool indeed. David, over to you. How important is it to have money for a future shock, like Kakora or the many shocks we've had? How important is that resilience
I think
in
it's
a budget?
extremely important that New Zealand has resilience. And the issue is that people focus on public debt, which is about 23% of GDP, one of the lowest in the OECD. The real issue is the 400% of GDP debt that households and businesses have on their mortgage and so on. So if you're worried about debt, you shouldn't be worried about the government's debt. You should be worried about the private household and business debt.
He's absolutely right, isn't he?
And that's why you should cut taxes.
Private debt's a shocker in New Zealand.
Private household debt is at record levels at the moment in New Zealand. And you know what's driving that, Wallace? House prices and the cost of rents and properties. That's actually what's doing it. So if you want to deal with private debt, by all means, let's tax property.
So how would Labour Greens deal with the shocking rate of private debt in Aotearoa?
Well, they'd legislate for it. I mean, these guys are interfering with people's lives. It's private debt, by definition. It's nothing to do with the government.
Hang on, let Grant answer first.
So we announced it in the weekend. We're not going to let people offset the losses from their property portfolio against their income tax so they don't have to pay anything. We're getting rid of that loophole. We're going to make sure if you flip an investment property within 5 years, you'll have to pay tax on that. And we're going to ban overseas borrowers. That's actually going to do that.
Hang on. Alistair, David
All
Seymour.
the students in the Yarrow Valley that vote for Grant, your landlord is using that tax loophole. And if Grant gets in and uses that policy, your rent's going up, I'm telling you.
Rents are a function, Wallace.
That's right.
Rents are a function of supply and demand, and David should know that. Those houses don't cease to exist. They'll still be there will still be rentals.
Comment from Alistair and Julianne.
Ring fencing houses is not the answer. I mean, I've got a wine business. I could have a trucking. No one's going to ring fence my wine business and my trucking business and my private education business. Why are we proposing to ring fence a property business?
Okay, Julianne can respond to that.
People aren't paying tax on the capital gains, and landlords are able to negatively gear. That means that there's too many investors in the property market and not enough houses for first home buyers. And if you fix that, if you fix it through taxing capital gains, protecting renters, we'll have more affordable houses.
Okay, let me. What about? So let me use myself as an example. Have a small rental. It's for retirement, okay?
Ooh, bad. You're bad. That's naughty. You're a speculator. You're an investor. You're a bad person.
What about people like me, a small-time investor who is not
negatively geared your property?
Sorry, he was asking.
No.
No, sorry.
People have done what makes sense under the current tax system.
Hang on, Julianne.
People aren't bad. They've done what makes sense under the current tax system, but that's bad for New Zealand as a whole. And we have to face that problem together and make the changes so we have a fairer tax system and more affordable housing.
Okay, wow. All right.